Let's keep the conversation on equipment going. Kip Eiderberg is the Senior VP of Government and Industry Relations at the Association of Equipment Manufacturers. And Kip joins us right now. Kip, welcome back to AgriTalk. How are you?
Hey, Chip, I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me back on the show. Always a pleasure. And I got to tell you, listening to your previous guest, I think I got to get a new job here, get a sign business, because that seems to be booming.
Tell me about it.
Wow.
$108,000. Now, it was neon. I'm sure that it was gorgeous. But like I said,
Yep.
somebody's really committed to a collection. That's something.
Yeah. And someone's making a pile of money, too. So good for them.
That's right. That's right. You know, Kip, I've got some specific items that I want to go through, and I want to talk about the July sales data. But you know, as the conversation is getting started here, I'm just curious what you're working on every day. What's at the top of your priority list?
Well, that's a great way to kick off this conversation. So, for equipment manufacturers, we have remained laser focused on bipartisan policies that will help strengthen American manufacturing. And as I'm sure you know, and your listeners, we had a bit of a win a few weeks ago with the passage of the Chips and Science Act. That's that big piece of legislation, right? That's going to sink a lot of money into domestic production of semiconductors. And that is, let's be clear, that is a historic bipartisan investment in U.S. made. I'll say that again, U.S. made semiconductor production. And equipment manufacturers, thanks to that investment, will now be able to invest in our workers, in our communities, drive innovation, and strengthen our country's long-term economic competitiveness and national security, which is important too. And I'll just close by saying, we surveyed 100 CEOs of small, mid, and large companies a few months ago, and 7 out of 10 CEOs said that they would create more jobs as a result of increased domestic semiconductor production. So that's been what we've been up to lately, Chip, and it's good news for our industry.
Okay, put a timeline on that for me, Kip. When can we expect some of that chip manufacturing in particular to provide more supply here in the States?
Well, that's a great question. It's a question that we're all asking ourselves. So what now? We've been having conversations with the White House. We've been having conversations with the chip manufacturers. They're feeling fairly optimistic that we're going to start seeing a real impact towards the end of next year. And I know, to some folks, they go, well, you spent all this time and effort getting this massive bill done. You're spending a lot of money. But now we have to wait another year or so. But obviously, it takes time, this, to start getting production up and running. Some of these factories have to be built, whether it's in Texas, whether it's in Ohio. But I think what it will do in the short term is spur optimism among our members, and I think manufacturers as a whole, that the U.S. is committed to bringing back production to the United States. So that's going to give us some optimism. And I think starting towards end of next year, we'll start seeing more American-made semiconductors coming into the market, which means that we can continue to make more equipment, right? And so, you talked to your previous guest about this, the continued desire and demand for equipment. We're not there yet because of supply chain bottlenecks and lack of inventory, components, semiconductor in particular. Hopefully we can start addressing some of those issues.
Yeah. Trade is when you're dealing with trade partners, it can be high anxiety, fickle reactions, whatever. Those countries that we are currently getting the microprocessors from, because we've got equipment sitting in lots, new equipment sitting in lots that need chips and chips only, right?
We do. It's not all, and this is important. It's not all chips. As I travel around the country and visiting these factories, sometimes it's tires, windshield wipers, wiring harnesses, but chips are getting the bulk of the attention because chips are what we are missing the most of at any given point of time. So you're absolutely right on that.
Man, windshields, tires. We were in Grand Island, last week on crop tour, and people were talking about how the combine plant over there in Grand Island, how they need tires. When are we going to get through this supply chain crunch?
Well, I think that's the question that we are all asking ourselves, Chip. And the answer is, it depends. It depends on, number one, what will our elected officials in Washington and across the country in state capitals, what will they do to help spur American manufacturing? We need to invest more. You and I have talked about this, and we need to make it more competitive for American manufacturers to establish themselves in the U.S. or to bring jobs back to the U.S. So, we need everything from beneficial trade policies, a competitive tax code, investment in our workforce. It's a lot that needs to happen at the same time, and government does not move fast, certainly not fast enough. So when will it happen? I can't tell you that, but I think we are on a trajectory here where we're going to start seeing better days ahead in terms of supply chains being strengthened, in terms of production being brought back to the U.S. You talked about those trading partners that we have around the world. I think you're going to start seeing the United States focusing on our friends more so than our enemies, or those that are of questionable nature in terms of our relationship. There's a concept called friendshoring that has been getting a lot of attention. And what that means is that rather than just onshoring everything, bringing everything back to the U.S., which isn't feasible always, let's just, if we have supply chains, let's make sure that those are with countries that are friendly to us. So, it's going to take a little bit of time, but we are optimistic. We are optimistic. The outlook, I think, for next year is looking better and better.
Yeah. Okay. So, through all of this, Kip, how is what the industry is dealing with going to permanently change things into the future? How is it going to change the way that manufacturing happens?
It's a great question. I think you're going to start seeing a couple of things. Number one, I think you are going to start seeing a move towards more U.S.-based manufacturing, closer to the customer, closer to the suppliers. I'm not sure we're going to return to the halcyon days of the 70s and 80s, right? But I think what we've learned, certainly our industry, Chip, from this pandemic, is that we got to rely more on ourselves. So you're going to start seeing that, which I think will help in terms of providing our customers, our dealer partners, and farmers and ranchers with more equipment on time. So that's number one. Number two, you're going to start seeing some innovation in terms of how we produce equipment. Now, that doesn't mean fewer jobs. It's always a fear that more automation leads to fewer jobs. It doesn't. It leads to better jobs, and in some cases, more jobs. So you're going to start seeing our industry adapting to the technology that's out there to be more efficient, to make more equipment. And those are also then more exciting opportunities for young men and women to get into our industry. If you're now basically a computer programmer, but your skills allow you to basically help make equipment, I think that's exciting to a lot of young people. And then you're just going to start seeing, I think, a greater reliance on made to order in some cases, where obviously it's important that dealers have new equipment sitting on their lots. But we've also learned from the pandemic that if we can take a page out of some industries where, you make equipment as orders come in, provided that you have the capability to do so, I think that helps mitigate some of the supply chain issues. So those are some of the trends that we are seeing, heading into next year.
Okay. All right. So when the Chips and Science Act was passed, you think about the long-term implications of it, and you think about the trends in the technology and everything. And one thing that concerns me is that we're going to make a big investment in something that suits today's technology. Does the investment through that Chips and Sciences Act, does it address future technology? And what are the trends that we're seeing there?
Yeah, it sure does, right? This is a massive investment in domestic, not just production, but research and development, right? So that we can make sure that the next gen chips that we need for the tractors, the combines of tomorrow, that research is done here, the production is done here. So absolutely it will. And going back to that survey for a second, Chip, 60% of CEOs that we surveyed, they reported lost sales opportunities and delayed production due specifically to chip shortages. So we got to fix the chip problem. And so that is what this massive legislation, massive in terms of how much money it's going to spend, will help do. In terms of what to expect looking ahead, I mean, look, we as an industry have always been committed to providing solutions to farmers and ranchers. And so we are constantly, our members, that is, and the association as a whole, having conversations about what can we do to make farmers more productive, more efficient, to mitigate the footprint, to set their farms up for success, not just for the current generation, but for future generations. So I think you're going to start seeing, more efficient equipment through precision agriculture technologies. You're going to start seeing some autonomy. We have some already, more to come. Again, efficiency, also addressing some safety issues and some workforce challenges through automation of the equipment. And you're just going to start seeing more connectivity, even more so between equipment, so that you can, if you look at your farm holistically, you can bring this precision agriculture technology to bear, not just to one piece of equipment, but to your entire fleet, again, driving more efficiency, more production, more output. So we're constantly innovating as an industry, but it is a partnership with farmers and ranchers, with our customers, because we got to make sure we meet their needs, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Kip, it's an industry that's got its challenges, but it's an industry in which it seems like there is a lot of optimism for the future.
Absolutely. And if we can just figure out how we train the next generation of equipment manufacturers, if we can convince our elected officials in Washington in particular to put aside their petty bickering and to move forward with pro-manufacturing policies, I think there are good days ahead for us, Chip.
All right. Kip, thank you so much for making time for us. We certainly appreciate it.
Always a pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Excellent. Thank you. That is Kip Eiderberg. He is a Senior VP, Government and Industry Relations for the Association of Equipment Manufacturers.